International tensions and growing inequalities have had important consequences on the global talent scene. The 9th edition of the Global Talent Competitiveness Index compares the performances of 133 countries regarding their respective abilities to grow, attract, and retain talent. Today we have with us the two co-editors of the GTCI, Dr. Bruno Lanvin, co-founder and director of Portugal Institute, and Professor Felipe Monteiro, Senior Affiliate Professor of Strategy at INSEAD. Welcome, Bruno and Felipe. This new edition of the GTCI report paints a rather alarming picture of global inequalities. Bruno, have we seen any dramatic changes in terms of talent competitiveness?
Well, last year, GTCI 2021 warned that post-COVID recovery could deepen inequalities for talents and jobs. It particularly emphasized the possibility of what we call the K-shape recovery, that is one in which production resumes at an accelerated pace, but has very different impacts on the labor force of different sectors. It predicted that workers employable in sectors such as technology, retail, or software services would find more employment opportunities and better remuneration than those locked in other, often distressed activities such as travel or entertainment. GTCI 2021 also stressed that post-COVID recovery packages might create a greater divergence between growth rates in advanced rich countries and those prevailing in low-income countries, both because of uneven budgetary flexibility and because new protectionist tendencies, sometimes under the guise of resilience, would harm smaller and dependent economies more than larger ones. Clearly, those predictions have proved right. Moreover, they have been accentuated by the combination of several elements, all pointing at increasing inequalities in the labor and talent scene. First, COVID has not gone away. The virus mutation suggests that it may be with us for a long time, although in less lethal and more manageable forms. Over the last few months, scourges that might have been seen as long extinguished have made a spectacular comeback, including international tensions and inflation. The last 2 years have seen resumed growth in the global number of poor people. This is a remarkable setback occurring after almost 3 decades of continuing success in poverty reduction. Growing income inequalities naturally entail all sorts of inequalities in multiple other areas, due both to lack of investment and opportunities, and also to a reordering of priorities that inevitably occur when feeding one's family becomes a more immediate concern than allowing children to get an education, for example. The war in Ukraine has also created additional tensions on food and energy markets, for both of which many poor and emerging economies have to rely on external supplies. All these elements, by elevating the global level of inequalities, have important consequences on the global talent scene, where growing inequalities are often linked to irreversible phenomena and could stand in the way of realizing some of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. This is why we speak of a tectonics of talent.
So this year's top 25 countries were remarkably similar to last year's. Felipe, were there any remarkable changes in the rankings this year?
So you're right. So in this year's GTCI's rankings, Switzerland continues number 1, followed by Singapore, Denmark, and the US. European economies, mostly Nordic ones. Australia, the UK complete the top 10. France continues to be 19th. And Estonia entered the top 20 rankings. What is also notable for this year, so for the second time, we have Chile in the top quartile, and China continues to climb the rankings, and now is the most talent competitive upper middle income country in the world. What else? Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Israel, Japan, and the UAE all figure among the top 25 global talent competitiveness countries. So the success cannot be denied, so this is very good, right? And they should deserve both acknowledgement and consideration as they have the potential to inspire others. However, Katie, I think that kind of the stability in the top rankings and the outstanding performances of the talent champions may provide a false sense of normality and optimism. So this is not, right, what our report suggests. There are worrying signs that start to permeate the global talent scene. And because this is the 9th edition of GTCI, that allows us to look not only at the snapshot, but also how the talent scene has been evolving over the years. So our longitudinal analysis comparing groups of countries indeed show mounting talent inequalities between high-income countries and low-income countries, not to mention substantial gender-related talent inequalities.
So yes, the report found striking gender-related talent inequalities. Bruno, could you tell us more about this?
Yeah, gender divides also have been highlighted in previous editions of GTCI. This year, we decided to go one step further and we sliced gender divides in different ways. We looked in particular at 3 indicators. 1, economic empowerment of women. 2, gender parity in high-skilled jobs. And 3rd, leadership opportunities for women. What the data shows is quite clear. First, greater economic empowerment of women is strongly associated with higher talent competitiveness. In fact, half of the 12 countries that achieved the highest possible score on this dimension of gender divides are in the top 15 of GTCI 2022. Second, there is also a strong positive correlation between greater gender parity and GTCI scores. Gender parity seems to be a great asset for talent competitiveness, although certainly not a sufficient condition. Clearly, countries like Germany, Norway, Belgium, which rank high on gender parity, are also top GTCI performers. But others who do at least as well in terms of parity performance still lag in overall talent performance. This is the case of countries like Eswatini, North Macedonia, or Brazil. Third, providing women with leadership opportunities equal to those of men seems to remain a challenge in most parts of the world. As expected, strong performers on that front are to be found in Northern Europe. Denmark, Finland, Iceland are there. And the extent to which private businesses offer such possibilities is remarkable in all 3 Baltic states. Estonia, which Felipe just mentioned as entering in the top 20 earlier, Latvia and Lithuania are in that situation. Albania is an interesting small European country that stands out in the many leadership opportunities that are provided there for women. But it is not a GTCI leader. Countries that would gain from increasing leadership opportunities for women include Lesotho, India, Iran, but such talent champions as Italy and Japan also are in that situation. In conclusion, GTCI data shows that in spite of encouraging signs, which cannot be denied and can be found mostly in Nordic countries, gender divides remain prominent on the talent scene. COVID has annihilated part of recent progress made on that front. The particular situation of girls in Africa and other parts of the world who were prevented from going to school during COVID is particularly dramatic in that sense, as most of them may never return to school. This is one example among many that there is still a lot of work to be done in fighting gender divides.
How could these new education divides that you speak of, ignited by the pandemic, how could they derail some of our ability to reach SDG targets? And what can be done to reduce these inequalities, Felipe?
Yeah, so in the SDGs, goal number 4, right, color of education includes 10 targets that are measured by 11 indicators. So let me give you some examples. So these indicators could be equal access to quality pre-primary education, elimination of all discrimination education, build and upgrade of inclusive and safe schools, so on and so forth. Clearly, the large majority of such targets could be negatively affected by the current talent inequality trends our reports describes. So Maybe I could start by just saying, the impact of COVID on children's education in poor countries has been devastating, leading to the worst shock to education and learning in a century, according to the World Bank. I'll give you some figures. The percentage of children in low and middle income countries unable to read and understand a simple text by the age of 10 has risen from 53% to 70%. So almost 3/4 of children cannot read or understand a simple text by the age of 10. Some other figures. 258 million children worldwide are out of school, and they are disproportionately located in lower middle income countries and countries which are conflict affected. 2, children from the poorest 20% of households dominate the out-of-school population and are far less likely than higher income children to ever enroll. I'll give another one. Only 20% of the poorest children in low-income countries are completing their primary education, preventing them from obtaining decent jobs and contributing to their community's well-being. So if you put together, right, and I just gave you a few examples, how do those figures translate in terms of global talent competitiveness? So we look now at data, the different pillars of our model, and clearly inequalities across income level groups have increased primarily in 2 pillars of our model, which are enable and grow. So that observation points to 2 areas, and you asked me what could be done, right? 2 areas which action is most urgently required to prevent this aggravation, acceleration of the imbalances. Clearly, education/skilling reforms and institutional reforms. So what kind of reforms, right? Education reforms could include, in particular, an acceleration, sometimes a resumption of the fight against illiteracy, as well as new effort to provide kind of better jobs and employment opportunities to younger generations. For example, upskilling efforts and apprenticeship programs.
Looking at the Global Cities Talent Competitiveness Index, what shifts and changes have we seen this year, Bruno?
Well, cities will be playing increasingly important roles in the next wave of globalization. That's a given. This is already very clear in the area of talent and talent competition. It is often cities more than nations that vie to become talent hubs. This 9th edition of the GCTCI increases the city coverage from 155 last year to 175 cities located in a total of 79 economies. The cities included in the index this year represent a mix of large and small urban centers, some of which are national capitals or leading urban areas, while others can be seen as secondary hubs or even remote locations. The cities were identified on the basis of their reputation and growing footprint in attracting global talent rather than as a function of their size or national capital status. The availability and comparability of data obviously also played a key role in the selection process. The index continues to be dominated by European cities, which account for more than 1/3 of the total coverage, 68 out of 175. For the second year running, Greater San Francisco is the top-ranked city in the index. It is followed by another US city, Boston, which climbs 1 position compared to last year. The top 3 is completed by Zurich, which likewise is 1 better than last year, Geneva, which was 2nd last year, and drops this year to 7th, and is the only 3rd-based Swiss city in the index, because Lausanne, a new entrant this year, is ranked ahead of it in 5th position. So things have been moving quite a bit at the top of the city ranking. The remaining cities in the top 10 are Seattle, number 4, Singapore, number 6, Helsinki, number 8, Munich, 9, and Dublin, number 10. Cities can play a central role in reducing inequalities by adopting the right talent policies. This is one key message that emerges from this year's report. At city level, talent, including access to education and meaningful working opportunities, is a clear divider between rich and poor, let's say, to simplify. International evidence also underlines that those cities that have granted priority to growing, attracting, and retaining talent have done better in providing their citizens with just better lives. As the world enter times of higher economic, social, and political uncertainty, talent hubs will be better equipped to weather the storm. Cities that appear well positioned to be future ready include many medium-sized cities, typically between 200,000 and 2 million population, as well as those that will prove agile enough to align and mobilize their resources along key lines such as digital transformation, offering attractive work environments to younger generation, and contributing to reaching SDGs. Cities have critical roles to play at all those levels.
Finally, Felipe, what are the key takeaways from this year's report, and what are the priorities for action?
So there are a few takeaways, and let me take advantage to kind of encourage those watching this video, right, to go download the full report. It's kind of freely accessible, kind of a lot of details for each country, but let me highlight 3 key takeaways. So message number 1, despite continuing imbalances and inequalities, the global talent competitiveness scene remains dynamic, and there's some encouraging signs. So this is good news. And what we see smaller economies continue to display top-notch talent performance. So for example, this year, Denmark outpaces the US and becomes number 3 in the index. Middle-income countries continue to show remarkable individual regional performance. So for example, China continues to climb the rankings. So that's message number 1, a positive one. Message number 2, recent and current crises could have a negative and maybe sometimes irreversible impact on the talent situation of poor economies. And even in higher income economies, labor markets may become more fragmented, hence generate new types of inequalities. So I think Bruno mentioned this before, there's a lot going on in the talent scene. And I think Bruno also mentioned COVID. So COVID, has not gone away. So other things are happening, right? We have a serious international geopolitical tensions, energy crisis, inflation. Who is most affected by that? Poorer economies, right? Who could be then disproportionately affected, and talent inequalities would grow. So we need to pay attention to that. But even if you are located in high-income countries, those at the top of our rankings, for example, there are new things going on, right? New working habits, attitudes towards employment. People are talking about, quiet quitting, younger generations increased attraction towards gigs and part-time jobs. So this is kind of shattering long-established implicit rules and calling for new ways to grow, attract, and retain talent at the company level. And maybe message number 3, and right, we talked before about SDGs. A more unequal global talent landscape would significantly diminish our collective ability to meet some key targets of the SDGs. So we believe, right, that the local and collective efforts are urgently required to reduce those talent inequalities that are most likely to prevent the world from reach specific SDGs and their targets. So this would particularly true in the case of goals number 4, quality education, goal number 5, gender equality, goal number 8, decent work and economic growth, and 10, which reduce inequalities. So what do we hope, right? We hope that once more, people will look at our report and rankings get a lot of attraction. But we hope that the report's a call for action and for some consultation among different stakeholders. We're talking about, business sector, public sector, academia, civil society, to address those increasing divides in the talent scene. And maybe a final point, next year is the 10th anniversary of GTCI, so we're looking forward to a special edition of GTCI 2023.
Fantastic. Thank you, Felipe. Thank you, Bruno.
Thank you.
Thank you.